This junk journal was inspired by a digital download from Digital Collage Club called Betty Boop. Now I took these images and resized them and turned them into pages that I used for my signatures for this journal. I have five signatures that I created. For this particular journal, I'm going to be using a custom cover with the signatures hand sewn to the spine using a cross-stitch binding method. The first thing I do is I complete all of my signatures, my pages, my papers, my altered clips, my journaling cards, and that gives me the opportunity to see, when all of my signatures together, how big this album is going to be, or this journal is going to be. And that will give me the opportunity to add or take away from the album. When I'm getting ready to bind the album, to make the cover and bind the album, I take all of my journaling cards, my altered clips out of my book just for ease in working with this book. When I'm binding it, I take all of the tags and that sort of thing. Anything that's loose, I take out so that it won't get caught up in the stitching or be a problem. So I take everything out in preparation for making the, adhering the signatures, sewing the signatures into the book. So I think I have everything out of this particular signature. Now, how I know where these go, I have a little post-it note that I have number 5 on, and I put that on the inside of this signature, and then I have 5 in a Ziploc bag, and I put all of these things in this Ziploc. That's marked number 5, and I know that all of these items go in my number 5 signature. And I have one of these bags for each signature in my book, so I know where all of my little elements go. The next thing I do is I organize the signature so that I'll be ready to bind them in the album. I've marked the center of each one of these pages, and I match the centers. And if it's a smaller page, I take painter's tape and I just use that to secure that in place so it won't be moving around on me. And then I go page by page and match my centers. Each time I'm just sure that it matches. And this is the center for this one. Now this particular page I want to secure at the top. So I'm going to be sure that it's held in place by some painter's tape. I've marked the center of that. So the next page I'm going to bring in. It's that at the center. This is my little doily. And the center of my doily is right there. And here's the center of this page, which is going to be right here. Now I want to go ahead and secure that doily because it's a little smaller. And I'm going to go ahead and secure this page because it's a little smaller. I'm going to bring this page in. This one's a little tougher to see the center mark. I'll have to go to this side. There's the center mark on that one. Again, I want to be sure that all the centers are matched up. So I'm going to use a little piece of painter's tape on that one. Then I'm going to match the center of this. This is the center of that one. And this is my last piece. It's an envelope. And so I'm going to use a piece of painter's tape and put that in place. Then taking my centering ruler, I'm going to find the center of this envelope and mark the center of this envelope because I'll be needing that mark later on. right here. Okay, and I want to be sure that these all stay in place, so I'm going to kind of snug them up here with this ruler, like this. And then I'm going to take large paper clips. I have 6 large paper clips, and I'm going to use these paper clips to clip all these pages together. I use 2 at the bottom. I come up here, and I'm going to put 1 at the top. I'm going to put 1 at the side. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. Again, I'm going to use this ruler to be sure that it's snug down, that those pages are snug down. And I'm going to put my paper clips. And that helps me to operate with this signature as a single unit. It's not just a bunch of pages flying around. So now I have that ready to go. Okay, now the next thing I do, I need to determine the size of my cover. I take this signature and I use the signature for reference, and I know that this signature is 5 3/4 by 8 1/2. So in order to make my cover, I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to the width and a 1/2 inch to the height. So that makes my front and back covers 9 inches by 6 1/4. I cut 2 medium weight chipboard pieces, and I cut 2 light weight chipboard pieces for the front and back. To determine how big my spine is, I use the height, 9 inches, and the width is determined by the number of signatures I'll be using. I have some templates that I made up that I use frequently, and these templates, on either side of each, the right and the left, I have a 1/2 inch allowance. Between each signature, I have a 1/4 inch allowance. So when we look at this spine, this is going to be for 2 signatures, 1 signature here, 1 signature here, and a 1/2 inch, and this is a 1/4 inch. I mark the top, so I'm always using this side as the top. So this particular spine would be 1 1/4 inches. If I have 3 signatures, I mark the center line horizontally and vertically, and when you have an odd number of signatures, the signature line for the middle signature is always the center line. So you have 1, 2, 3 signatures. I have a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch between signatures, so that's going to be 1 1/2 inches for 3 signatures. If you have an even number of signatures, your center point is going to fall between signature lines. And again, I always mark my absolute centers because I use that as reference. So in this case, you're going to have 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. You're going to have 3/4 inch, so this spine measures 1 3/4 inches. These templates come in really handy because if I have a cover that I'm going to alter, I have these templates to kind of try to see if, as an example, in this cover, 4 signatures are going to work really well for this cover. If I try another template, a 3 would probably be not quite enough, and definitely not 2. So I use these templates in a lot of different ways, and that gives me a heads up on how many signatures to put in a altered book. So another thing that I mark on these is I mark 1 inch intersect points. This is your center line, and I go 1/2 inch on either side of the center line, and I mark every inch. So I have intersect points. This is the template of the spine piece for the journal I'm working on now. So I know that it's going to be 2 inches, a half an inch here, half an inch here, and 1/4 of an inch between signatures. So I cut 1 medium weight and 1 light weight for my spine pieces. When I have the 1 inch marks, if you're going to be using a pamphlet stitch, you would use your absolute center line, and then you would maybe come down here and put a pilot hole, and you would put a pilot hole at each one of these intersect points. Since we're going to be doing a cross-stitch binding, my pilot holes are going to be every inch on each of the signature lines. This kind of allows you to choose a variety if you wanted your pamphlet stitches to be 2 inches apart, let's say, or any combination. You have your 1 inch marks so that you can use any stitching method, binding method you would use. You choose any of the points, the intersect points. If you're going to be using a hidden binding, pamphlet stitches work very great for that. Pamphlet stitches look nice on the back of a spine, as do cross stitches. So you're going to be making intersect points. Once you decide what kind of a stitch you're going to use, you make your pilot holes at the intersect points. Now you don't do that on your template. Your template just gives you an idea of where you can put those intersect points. What I use on my spine is Tyvek. I buy Tyvek from my office supply store. This is a package of 5, very reasonably priced. And the first thing I do when I take out an envelope is I release the bottom, and I release this. I use a little palette knife. It releases easily, and that gives me 1 flat piece of Tyvek to work with. My Tyvek piece, my reinforcement piece, is going to be, the measurement for that is going to be determined by the width of the spine. In this case, I have a 2-inch spine. On either side of the spine is going to be a 3/8 inch ease, and on either side of the ease is going to be a 1-inch space that's going to be attached to the cover. So I will cut my Tyvek to measure 4 3/4 by 9. Now on my Tyvek piece, following the guidelines that I use when I make my templates, I mark my absolute center points, and then from the center point I start marking for my signature lines. I mark every inch, because again I'm going to be using the cross stitch. If you're going to use a pamphlet stitch, you would have decided from your template where those lines were going to be, and let's say one would be here, and one would be here, and one would be here. You have your ease, this little area is your ease, and then you have the 1 inch that's going to be attached to your cover. So this is 4 3/4 inches by 9. I've made all of the marks on this piece of Tyvek that I will need when I'm making my pilot holes for my binding. The first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use this as a template for making the pilot holes in my signatures. I'm going to take each signature, and I'm going to take, I've marked the center, I'm going to take the Tyvek piece, I'm going to match the Tyvek, I'm going to align the center points of the Tyvek. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape. I just want to steady that Tyvek so I can make my pilot holes. And I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to put my painter's tape here and my painter's tape here. And you can use a book, you can use any punchy thing that they'll give you some room to punch. This is a Sizzix, and I think it's called a crafting mat or something. And this is a stamping side, and this is a piercing side. So I'm going to hold my signature, and at each one of these intersect points, I'm going to hold it in a V. I'm going to use my awl, and I'm going to make a pilot hole. Every place there's this intersect. And I'm using my Tyvek piece because this is actually going to be the piece that will be used when I make my journal. And I do this to every one of my signatures. Now, the value of holding your signature in a V shape is that you will get your pilot holes lined up exactly on the spine. If you lay it flat, you may be off. If you just lay it like this, you may be off. But if you hold it at a V, you'll be right on the button. And you do that to all of your signatures. I've done that to all 5 of my signatures. Now my signatures are all ready. You see the holes are lined up, and they're all ready to be bound